Today at noon will mark President Trump's 500th day in office. And while some in the media won't admit it, our commander-in-chief has actually racked up a pretty impressive list of accomplishments. Here to discuss, the founder and executive director of Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk. Charlie, good to have you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, let's start. One of the things the president said when he was a candidate is, you put me in the Oval Office and I will cut as much red tape. And dramatic deregulation is certainly being accomplished.
That's right. It's the most dramatic deregulation in American history. And on the campaign trail, he famously promised to cut two new regulations for every one that's put on the books.
Ambitious.
And the numbers are in. I mean, he cut 22 for every new one put on the books. It is the largest reduction in the Federal Registry in American history. And so, look, even Bush, who was a free market guy, supposedly, the Federal Registry grew under Bush. It grew under Obama. It grew under Clinton. And for those of us that have really understood what has been putting American business less competitive over the last decade, regulation is the true tax on American business.
And I can't tell you how many people I know in business just love the fact that they're cutting a lot of red tape.
And it lowers the cost of compliance. It makes us more competitive internationally. And this is something that it's really hard to see up front. But you see when a business has less compliance cost, has to deal with less lawyers and less regulators, that's where you're going to start the economy moving again.
500 days in, historic economic success. You look at it, 223,000 jobs added in May, the unemployment at 3.8%, 62.7% labor participation, GDP estimate 4.7%.
By the Atlanta Fed. Unbelievable. So, look, the New York Times said it best. We've run out of words to describe how good these job numbers are. But not only that, here's something that needs to be talked about. Record low black unemployment. Record low Latino unemployment. The largest tax cut in American history. The repealing of the individual mandate tax, which really isn't talked about a lot, which was a tax on my generation. So think about it. You're a 29-year-old. You're still trying to get your life going. And next thing you know, the government is paying you because you have to buy expensive and pricey health insurance. President Trump got rid of that. It is the healthiest, strongest economy of my generation, if not of the last 50 years.
And just imagine the impact President Trump is having on the judiciary.
Oh, my goodness.
1 in 8 appellate judges now are from the Trump administration.
It's totally amazing. And so if you look at the verticals that the left thought they were going to control, they thought they were going to control the media, education, politics, and then the courts. And really what they've been most upset about is the fact that President Trump is reshaping the federal judiciary for a lifetime. Like you said, 1 out of 8 justices now appointed by him, and we can't forget the amazing Justice Neil Gorsuch.
Okay, we're 500 days in, still no wall, still no trillion-dollar infrastructure.
We need it. Look, the president has a willingness and a pen ready to sign these bills. We need Republicans in Congress to step up and fulfill the Trump promises and the Trump agenda. I will say this, though, where he has been able to make decisions, he's the first president in American history to be attacked by the media for keeping his promises. You look at moving the embassy to Jerusalem, withdrawing from TPP, the massive deregulations we talked about, the canceling of the Iran deal. When the chips are down, President Trump says, what did I say on the trail? What did I promise voters? Because he's not owned by donors. He's not owned by elites. He was put there by voters, the American people.
So today marks 500 days. He still has 962 left in his term.
No. What are you talking about? He has another 4 after that because he's going to get convincingly reelected.
All right. Charlie Kirk, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great to have you. All right. Coming up on this Monday, the head of Starbucks is brewing up controversy, blaming President Trump for increasing racial tension here in the USA.
Has given license to people to feel as if they can emulate the kind of behavior and language that comes out of this administration.
That was fun, right?
All right, time now for some quick Monday morning headlines for you. First up, pack your bags. That's what Italy's new interior minister is telling illegals in Italy. Matteo Salvini wants to increase deportations and stop migrants from flocking to his country of Italy. The country is one of the main destinations for migrants arriving from Africa on boats. He says stopping them would save lives. And here at home, migrants now being told to record their encounters with Border Patrol agents. Thousands of people downloading the app MigraCam in the last 6 weeks, which allows users to send video over email and text. This program started in part by the ACLU of Texas. It follows other resistance apps and Cell 411 and Notifica, among other things. And that is some of the news on this Monday morning.
All right, 25 minutes now after the hour. Dan Bongino has been scrambled early for us. You know, he's done just about everything in this world. Former Secret Service agent. He's host of the Dan Bongino Show. They named it first and then hired him. And then he's also been an NYPD officer. So we got to bring you to culture, this culture war that we're having now between who can offend who and what should happen. Joy Reid is the latest. So we go back in time to look at some of the things she said and some of the things she posted. At first, she said the FBI has to investigate this. I've been hacked. Later, she didn't, said she doesn't recognize that person anymore. And then she issued this apology, says there are things I deeply regret and I'm embarrassed by, things I should have said differently, and issues where my positions have changed. Today, I'm sincerely apologizing again. So she did not address that on her show. It looks like she got it passed. Is that okay, Dan?
No, it's not, Brian. And I'd like to make 2 points on this. Number one, I've heard often that, oh, there's a double standard out there. Brian, that's actually inaccurate, okay? There's a standard for conservatives, and the standard is this. You screw up, you will be boycotted and potentially fired from your job. That's the standard. There's not a double standard. There's no standard for the left. The left, you can use the most vile of terms. There was a word used by Samantha Bee so vile that even locker room, I talk, that is beyond the realm. That is what I call a showstopper word. You say it, everybody stops and looks at the person who said it and said, did you just say that? That was used on television, Brian. That was used on television in a scripted set. What happened to her? She apologized and she moves on. Joy Reid, vile, homophobic stuff in her blog. What happens? She gets a free pass. If that were a conservative, they would be gone the next day, no question about it.
Yeah, Dan, just to remind some of our viewers of the posts that we have now seen, they've surfaced. 9/11, an inside job. Also, I thought one of the worst was the Virginia Tech shooter with John McCain's head on top of it. I mean, she had the ability to actually put that out on her blog. It's not just like something that she thought of, you know, that it was actually put out there for the world to see. And as you said, she had the FBI look into it saying, there's no way I could have done this myself. Why not then come on the air on MSNBC and show a genuine apology as if you really did change? Talk to your viewers, talk to your audience and say, I really regret doing this. This was horrific. I am a changed person. Why can't you at the very least do that?
Well, a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't think these apologies are as sincere as they're making them out to be. You know, these may have been at the time genuine feelings. I mean, when you're a genuinely, whatever she wants to call it, evolved person, you're apt to get out on the air and want to do that. But can I say on this too, Abby? You know, seriously, I'm in this conservative content space like you guys are. What are the rules? Is it just fair for us to be able to ask, what are the rules? Are the rules you screw up? We're all going to screw up at some time. We all do content. You guys are live. You know, my show isn't. I have the ability to edit stuff. And there are times I've gone back and said, you know, that could be taken the wrong way and we cut stuff out. What are the rules? Are we allowed to apologize and then save our careers? Or are the rules you screw up one time, you send one bad tweet, and it's over? I think it's fair for conservatives and liberals to get together and say, fine. And you know what? Ironically, that's the one thing Sean Hannity and Bill Maher agree on. They both agree that people should be allowed to apologize and move on without the threat of constant boycotts to their careers and everything else. It's absurd.
And if you don't like somebody on TV, change the channel.
Change the channel.
Right.
Bingo.
Meanwhile, let's talk a little bit about this. Ben Rhodes, who has been at President Obama's side when he was in the Oval Office as a special advisor. He's coming out with a new book, and he quotes the president at the night of the election in 2016, realizing that Donald Trump was about to take office. He says, Mr. Obama said this, what if we were wrong? Maybe we pushed too far, Mr. Obama said. Maybe people just want to fall back into their tribe. Sometimes I wonder whether I was 10 or 20 years too early, he said. Now, what does that sound like to you? Does that sound like President Obama was saying, you know, this has been a failure unless I was born 10 or 20 years in the future?
No, it sounds like he's blaming the American people. Here's what it really sounds like. Oh, they just weren't ready for my greatness yet. No, let me tell you what we weren't ready for. We weren't ready for your massive tax hikes, the worst GDP rates from a recovery from a recession in modern American history, your massive amounts of red tape you imposed on America, your war on school choice, your war on religion, and even worse, what we weren't ready for, Mr. Obama, was your weaponization of government through the IRS mess, this disgusting Spygate scandal. That's what we weren't ready for. But he's starting to realize that the real Obama record's coming out. So what does he do? He takes the Jimmy Carter malaise route and blames it on the American people. You just weren't ready for my higher order ideas. Give me a break. We were never going to be ready for that garbage.
Maureen Dowd was one who called him out in the New York Times yesterday, as if to say that the message that she's getting is that we're not worthy of him.
Yeah, I read the piece, and it's interesting but she does get on him a bit at the end, where she says, "Hey, listen, he fell into the trap he set for Hillary himself when he ran against her, as she was the establishment and he was the change agent." And of course, he's like, "Well, how didn't we see this coming with Donald Trump? Of course, he was going to play the same game on her we did."
Yeah, it's a great piece. If you haven't read it, Maureen Dowd, who analyzes this, go read it.
Who's not a friend of Donald Trump, by the way.
No.
All right, thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
Good to see you, Dan.
You got it, guys.
All right, coming up straight ahead, 4 people found dead. Now an urgent manhunt for a possible serial killer. The new details coming in overnight. We'll share them.
And President Trump finalizing plans for next week's North Korea summit in Singapore. Our next guest says the president is taking a page right out of the Ronald Reagan playbook.
Look at the size of that note.
It's
Plus,
a big envelope.
First, happy birthday to Angelina Jolie. The actress turns 43 years old today, still so young.
Let's hear her do something.
$20 million worth of plastic surgery. And that's the face you choose.
Do you not like it?
It'll do.
All right, glad you're up. Hope you're dressed. Many critics have blamed President Trump's rhetoric for the rise of racial tensions in America, including Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz, for example.
Probably has given license to people to feel as if they can emulate and copy the kind of behavior and language that comes out of this administration.
Wow, how's that? That's a big jump. Do comments like these do anything to advance dialogue, or is it simply looking for a scapegoat? Here to discuss the philosophy of Starbucks, as well as the philosophy of Howard Schultz, is Kevin Jackson, CEO of Laxsphere and Fox News contributor, and Democratic strategist Howard Franklin. Howard, do you agree with Howard Schultz that the president's coarsening, which some say is a coarse language, has led to incidents like what happened at that Starbucks in Philly?
I would absolutely agree. It's absolutely led to, or at least contributed to, the environment that we're operating in today. I mean, both as a candidate and as the president, the language that he's used has definitely given license to some of the more base elements of our society, both as candidates and individuals in the media.
Kevin, do you agree?
Howard Schultz needs to stick to selling coffee. This guy has stepped on more Guatemalans and Colombians than you can shake a stick at, and suddenly he wants to take up the cause of blacks in America. Howard Schultz hasn't gotten the memo that blacks do pretty well in America. And under President Trump, they're doing exceptional. Look at the gap between now unemployment between whites and blacks. He just appointed a black general to the Marine Corps. He freed 3 blacks, or a couple of black kids who had done some crimes in China. Blacks are the most employed than they've been in history. What more does Donald Trump need to do to demonstrate that he has nothing to do with this so-called racial rhetoric? What's funny, Brian, is that the left always talks about this unconscious racism. The biggest unconscious racism are the people like Howard Schultz, who are the biggest racists on the planet. Right. He wants America to believe that it takes him and a day of atonement for his company in order for blacks to be successful in this country, when all around Howard Schultz are nothing but successful blacks.
I don't think that, and I'm sure you don't mean that Howard Schultz are racist. You might say maybe some of his policies have a boomer. Sometimes he could be racially insensitive. Do you buy that?
Well, I appreciate Senator Scott's remarks. I mean, obviously, he's gotten an opportunity to know the president and serve with him. But I do think if you look at the record that Donald Trump has offered us, both as a candidate and as the president, I mean, he's talked about basically every racial group, every religious group. I mean, he's been sexist. And every opportunity he's taken, every opportunity has been completely unprompted. So I do believe this president owns some responsibility for normalizing racism, even if he's not necessarily the originator.
I'm sorry you feel that way.
That's absolutely that's not the case. And Brian, you don't need to correct me. Yes, I do believe Howard Schultz is a racist in the sense that he believes that he is better than blacks in this country, and it's going to take somebody like him who's going to have to help us.
All right, hold it real quick. Here's Bill Clinton on why he thinks President Obama was treated so well by the media.
Well, they did treat him differently than other Democrats and Republicans because it was the political press. I don't know. They liked him, and they liked having the first African-American president.
So do you think the media gave him an easy pass, Kevin, because he was black?
Absolutely. It was an affirmative action media, just like Barack Obama's presidency was an affirmative action presidency. Look, the only way you could look at Barack Obama as a success is if you look at color and him being the first black president. He lost the Democrats over 1,000 seats during his presidency, 2 horrific midterms that led to the election of Donald Trump. What else could they possibly look at?
Kevin, I'll give you that, but he has great charisma. He's a great speaker, extremely motivational. His book was a bestseller before he won. But maybe his policies, Bill Clinton feels a little frustrated because maybe he had better results. What's your reaction, Howard?
I would absolutely point a little bit to the fact that former President Clinton is selling a book at present, and obviously has reason to generate some news media. But yeah, I think there's some hurt feelings about the 2008 primary election, and beyond his assessment. I mean, he also mentioned 2 other things that we ought to pay a little bit of attention to. One being that he was likable, and 2 being that he did a good job as president. You guys cut that part out of the segment. 2 things we can't say about Donald Trump.
He didn't do a good job.
Yeah, it's Kevin really? Jackson and Howard Franklin. You guys disagree on that. Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate the debate. We need another hour. Jillian, what else is going on?
Well, good thing you have 2 more hours still to go, Brian.
Good, thank you.
Good morning to you. To you at home as well. We begin with a Fox News alert. The hunt is on for a possible serial killer after a 4th victim is shot dead. Marshall Levine, a counselor and life coach, killed inside an office building in Scottsdale. His death may be linked to 3 others, including Stephen Pitt, a psychiatrist in the JonBenet Ramsey case. Police have released a sketch of the suspect. There is a reward of up to $21,000. Joe Biden isn't ruling out a 2020 presidential run just yet. The former vice president says he'll decide after the midterm elections. That's according to NBC. He told MSNBC in April he knows he has to make a decision by the end of the year, but right now his family is his main focus. Biden has said he would have beat President Trump in the last election if he had decided to run. This royal wedding expert with a posh British accent has been exposed as an American. Just watch.
I address you today not as the chairman of the British Monarchist Society and Foundation, but a friend, a fellow defender of the crown.
Okay, so here's the deal. It turns out Thomas J. Mace Archer Mills Esquire is actually Tommy Muscatello from upstate New York. He did regular TV interviews leading up to Prince Harry's wedding last month. He says he's no fraud and never claimed to be British.
Wow.
That's funny.
I mean, did he say anything crazy, or was he just?
No, he just did it with an accent.
I just want to know, like, all the backstory now. How did he get booked for these jobs?
I blame us for believing it, because you can hear pretty quickly his accent is not real.
It's great.
Really?
Yeah, I can tell.
Well, you can tell because you've been around the world 20 times.
Janice, what do you think?
Maybe we're just unfamiliar with the Muscatello accent.
Is he from Brooklyn?
Right. By the way, look at the way he's dressed, too. No T-shirt, just a V-neck sweater.
Oh, he's from upstate.
What absorbed the perspiration?
That should have been the
I
sign.
want to hear his real accent, like Muscatello, right? All right, let's take a look. That was terrible. I apologize to all you upstate New Yorkers. Okay, here we go. 52 in New York, 61 in Cincinnati. Really, we have to get somebody on that. It would be really great to hear his real accent. There's the last 24 hours. The good news is this mid-Atlantic that we have taken a beating with flooding rainfall, epic flooding, and the potential for, the flooding and the river levels are very high, remain high. We are getting a period of drying out. So there's the good news. Future radar, we could see some showers and thunderstorms across the central U.S. as well as parts of the northern Rockies. It's going to remain hot across the southern portion of the country. And we start off cool, but we end up dry with 80 degrees here in New York City. So cool start.
heartwarm finish. Muscatello!
Muscatello! Love it. Thank you, Janet.
All right, see ya.
All right, coming up on this Monday, President Trump's finalizing his plans for his North Korea summit next week. Our next guest says the president is taking a page right out of the Ronald Reagan playbook.
Plus,
that envelope cracks me
it's
up.
huge. A major breakthrough in breast cancer research. This is a huge story this morning. Could thousands of women really be able to skip chemotherapy? More on that coming up.
Wow, that's exciting. Plus, Andy McCarthy, counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway on 500 Days and More, and Charles Payne on our economy. Is there a downside to all the upside?
Overnight, Secretary of Defense James Mattis back from a trip to Singapore where he talked denuking with world leaders ahead of the June 12th summit with North Korea in Singapore.
Wow, we're getting close. And as President Trump confirms the summit will be happening, our next guest says he can take a page from the Reagan playbook.
Peggy Grandy served as executive assistant to President Reagan and is the author of the book, The President Will See You Now, My Stories and Lessons from Ronald Reagan's Final Years. She joins us right now from Los Angeles. Peggy, good morning to you.
Good morning.
I read your op-ed regarding the upcoming summit, and, you know, given the fact that President Reagan had a number of them, you say one of the most important things he can take from the Reagan playbook is the saying that he developed during the years with Gorbachev, and that is trust but verify when it comes to North Korea.
Absolutely. Of course, there's so much uncertainty heading into this summit, but it is certain that President Trump is taking a page from the Reagan playbook, and that should give us all confidence. Trust but verify is very important because we know this is a regime that has a history of broken promises. But Ronald Reagan believed in face-to-face diplomacy and believed that there was nothing that couldn't be solved or accomplished if two leaders sat down across the table from each other and talked about their differences, but also their shared goals. And so that's something President Trump has been committed to, and I think we're going to see that happen in just a few days.
You know, Peg, it's kind of interesting. Before the president sat down with Gorbachev, and I know he had to go through a few Russian leaders, he upped our strength. He upped the military spending. So we got the strength, we got their attention. Before this president sits down with the North Korean leader, he tightened the sanctions to an unprecedented level, got their attention. In a way, both plowed the ground effectively going in, right?
Absolutely. And when we talk about Ronald Reagan having that great phrase, peace through strength, people think of it primarily in the capacity of military might, but it really was about economic strength and capability as well. And Ronald Reagan knew that he had to put pressure on economically on the Russians, and we had to have the economic backing to back up our military might. We see President Trump putting pressure on a failing and fragile North Korean economy, and that's going to give him a position of strength when he comes to the table there in Singapore.
And Peggy, what did the president do last week? He walked away from the summit, which is exactly what President Reagan did in Iceland with Gorbachev, because Russia was saying, hey, you know what, United States, you got to forget about that SDI, the Star Wars thing. And Reagan said, what, are you kidding? I'm leaving.
Ronald Reagan knew that he would rather have no deal than a bad deal. He put America's interests first, and it was important to him to walk away from the negotiating table if he needed to. And in many ways, the press chided him at the time and said it was a failed summit. But really, it laid the foundation for the INF Treaty that was signed just a short year later. And so we cannot expect that the path to peace will be linear, straight, or predictable here with North Korea. And so President Trump will be willing to walk away, and that's important. He'll want a good deal for America, and that's good for him to do.
And Peggy, you were up close and personal with a man that I think both sides of the aisle looked up to. I look forward to seeing how well your book's going to do, because I think it's going to be huge. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You bet. All right, coming up on this Monday, a major breakthrough in breast cancer research. Thousands of women may be able to skip chemo. Dr. Nicole Saphier is going to break down the new study. You're going to want to hear it. It's next.
And President Trump's attorneys say he cannot be found guilty of obstruction of justice. Are they right? Former U.S. Attorney Andy McCarthy on that and the word Papadopoulos and what that means. I'm walking in front of Steve right now.
Always great to have you with us.
Thank you for
Dr.
having me.
Saphier. And this sounds like a really positive development.
This is big news in the breast cancer treatment world, and it just came out this weekend. Highly anticipated results from the TAILOR-X study. what this is showing us is the most common form of breast cancer, as you mentioned. Before, we have known that you can divide these essentially into low risk of recurrence, high risk of recurrence, but there was a 2/3 area of gray where we didn't know if they were high or low risk. So we've just been treating kind of everyone with intermediate and high risk with chemotherapy. This study is telling us this large group may actually not even need chemotherapy.
And that's amazing. You think about chemo, it is so intense on the human body. I've heard of a number of situations where folks have cancer and the chemo ends up being more of an issue for them, more of a problem, even killing certain people more than the cancer does.
You know, as we've discussed, my grandmother had breast cancer. She died from complications of chemotherapy. You are absolutely right. The truth is chemotherapy does save lives. However, there are strong risks associated with this. And we are really trying to tailor down treatments to patients to make sure that we're giving them the safest and most effective treatments possible. And if they don't need chemotherapy, we don't want to subject that to those risks. And also, it costs a lot, too.
It does cost a lot. So what does this mean for women? As I gave you those stats, you know them, 260,000 this year alone. Women that down the road will get diagnosed with breast cancer. How should they think about what you're telling us now?
Well, luckily, these stats, these new research, it is a common practice. All oncologists are going to be aware of these results. So when you're diagnosed with breast cancer, it is not one size fits all. So you can't just have a knee-jerk response thinking, well, all of a sudden I'm not going to need chemotherapy. That's not true. There are a lot of things that go into what your treatment plan is. But the good news is a large percentage of women are not going to need chemotherapy, and it's not going to change their overall survivability.
Wow, that is good to hear.
Yes.
Dr. Sapphire, always good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. All right, coming up, remember when Mark Zuckerberg said this to Congress?
Every piece of content that you share on Facebook, you own, and you have complete control over who sees it and how you share it.
Complete control, really? Well, turns out he may have lied big time. The bombshell.
Trump's historic summit with Kim Jong-un.
These negotiations take time. Everything's on the table.
Rudy Giuliani doubling down on this Mueller probe, this investigation, saying if you throw out the subpoena, you are only going to further ignite this battle.
There's got to be a high bar they have to reach in terms of convincing us that they're fair, convincing us that we're going to get the things we need. I want to see the Spygate report. We just can't do it without that.
Today marks President Trump's 500th day in office. And, you know, he's gotten a lot done during his time in Washington.
He's the first president in American history to be attacked by the media for keeping his promises. He's going to get convincingly reelected.
If there were a Democratic president and these facts were present, most people I know in Washington believe impeachment hearings would have been done already.
Curry back in the corner. Nice little fake. Sets up another. Got it again. Steph Curry back-to-back threes.
Florida-Georgia line released 2 new songs over the weekend.
Did they really?
Yes, they did. One's called Colorado, and the other one's called Simple.
They are my favorite band right now. I'm going to check that out.
Right. I mean, you really like them, right?
Are you being honest?
No, I'm being honest.
No, they were great. They actually.
I really do love them.
They're great.
Their premiere of Cruise was on this program.
That's right. Didn't you interview Florida-Georgia line?
Yes, I did. And we're waiting for a sequel. But in the meantime, if you are in Nashville, go to the FGL House. It's right off Broadway. It is so cool. 3 floors, different theme each one.
By the way, a week ago today, I was in Oklahoma for the Folds of Honor golf tournament. And I was talking to your friend John Rich. And he was telling me about how you went to his house.
It was amazing.
It was about a week ago, Brian revealed that on his birthday, a couple of weeks ago, what Brian really would want was what John Rich had at his house, which was a bar, but also a stage.
Right.
Is that all you do? Just invade other people's homes?
I do.
And dream about living there?
It is like a little arena. And the bottom line, the best thing about John, the whole thing, they have a secret door in the back, and the door is basically all velvet.
By the way, John also said that after you left, they're missing some cutlery.
Right. That's about all. And the glassware.
A velvet door, though. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Meanwhile, at 2 minutes after the top of the hour, the countdown to Singapore, it's actually on. We're just 8 days now away from President Trump's historic summit with Kim Jong-un.
Here's what happened overnight. Our Secretary of Defense, James Mattis, returned from Singapore after talking about pulling the plug on North Korea's nukes with a number of other world leaders.
Garrett Tenney joins us live now from Washington with the very latest. Garrett, good morning. What are you hearing?
Good morning, y'all. Secretary Mattis did not sugarcoat his expectations